The Young and the Restless spoilers shock. Victoria had always been a woman who valued control, power, and appearances. Yet nothing could have prepared her for the storm that erupted inside her own family when she discovered Claire was pregnant. The news came like a knife to the heart, cutting through all the carefully constructed expectations she had laid out for her daughter's future. For Victoria, who had endured betrayals, marriages collapsing, and power struggles within Newman Enterprises, the idea that her daughter would jeopardize her life by bringing a child into the world under such reckless circumstances felt like the ultimate betrayal of everything she had tried to teach her. Claire's decision to be with Carl before marriage was bad enough in her eyes, but the pregnancy solidified what Victoria saw as the gravest mistake of all. Anger surged through her veins, not just at Claire's choices, but at the inevitability of what this meant: another tangled connection between the Newman family and the Abbotts. A family Victoria had spent years learning to mistrust. She knew too well the weight of Abbott deception, the way Jack had always clashed with Victor, the way Billy's self-destructs had threatened countless lives, and the way Kyle, despite his polished demeanor, could never truly separate himself from the legacy of manipulation and entitlement that came with being an Abbott. Victoria did not want her daughter to be tied into that cycle, not when she had fought so hard to carve out her own empire and protect her children from the mistakes of the past. But Claire, young and filled with her own sense of fragile hope, could not see the danger the same way her mother did. Victoria's fury was not just about the pregnancy itself, but about timing and consequence. She had been pressing Claire to be strong, to find her independence, to define herself before becoming entangled in a relationship that could drain her spirit and rob her of her own future. Yet Claire stood firm in her quiet rebellion, clutching onto the belief that this baby was her chance to make something meaningful out of a complicated love. What deepened the fracture between mother and daughter was the shadow of the secret that lingered unspoken. The real father of the child might not be Kyle at all. Claire had concealed the truth, knowing that exposing it would unravel everything. If it ever came to light that the baby was not Kyle's, not only would the Abbott family cast her aside, but the scandal would destroy her fragile reputation, branding her as reckless, deceptive, and unworthy of trust. Victoria could see it all unfolding: the whispers around Genoa City, the ruthless judgment of powerful families, the way her daughter would be crushed beneath the weight of shame and betrayal. She had tried to intervene before it was too late, but now she felt trapped between her maternal instinct to protect and the hard reality that the damage was already irreversible. The more Victoria pressed, the more Claire resisted, clinging to her decision with a stubbornness that reminded Victoria painfully of herself in her youth. Claire believed the baby was hers to protect, hers to nurture, and no one, not even her mother, could take that away from her. She did not want to be seen as weak, as someone who gave in to pressure or fear, and she certainly did not want to erase a part of herself that she already loved. But Victoria saw only danger in that choice, a dangerous vulnerability that would be exploited by the Abbotts and by anyone else who caught scent of the scandal. To her, the only path left was termination, a cold and brutal option, but one that would at least close the door on future ruin. She told herself it was the lesser of two evils, a desperate way to salvage what little could be saved before the fallout consumed her daughter. The clash between them became volcanic. Victoria, used to commanding boardrooms and dictating terms in business, now found herself powerless against her own child's heart. Claire, used to living under the shadow of a powerful mother, finally stood her ground in a way that was both admirable and terrifying. The arguments between them escalated into bitter shouting, Victoria's voice laced with desperation and anger, Claire's voice trembling but resolute. Both believed they were right, both feared what the future held, and both were blind to the fact that their war was tearing apart the bond they so desperately needed. Every word became a weapon, every plea an accusation, and the house echoed with the sound of two women locked in a struggle that was as much about identity as it was about life itself. For Victoria, it was never only about morality or family image, it was about survival in a world where weakness was blood in the water. She had seen women destroyed by men who promised love but delivered betrayal, seen how quickly loyalty in Genoa City turned to manipulation, and she refused to watch her daughter walk into that same fate. She saw herself as the only line of defense, even if it meant becoming the villain in Claire's eyes. For Claire, however, this was her chance to break away from being Victoria's daughter and instead become her own person. The child she carried symbolized not just a mistake but a possibility, a chance to prove she could make her own choices, even if they led to pain. She was determined to face the consequences, to carry her secret as long as she could, and to cling to the belief that love could still triumph even in the harshest of storms. Yet secrets have a way of festering, and Victoria knew time was against them. Every moment that passed brought them closer to exposure, closer to the day when the truth about the child's paternity would come out. And when it did, Victoria knew the Newmans would be dragged into yet another scandal, one that could weaken not just her daughter but the family empire she had spent a lifetime trying to secure. She could not allow that, yet she could not force Claire to bend to her will. The standoff left both women wry and exhausted, their love for each other buried beneath layers of anger, fear, and pride. As the days went on, the divide widened, with Victoria retreating into cold determination and Claire retreating into quiet defiance, both of them convinced that the other was wrong. Neither of them willing to see that perhaps the greatest tragedy was not the baby itself, but the crumbling of their bond. In Genoa City, where whispers travel faster than truth, it would not be long before others sensed the tension. The Abbotts, the Newmans, and every rival who ever sought an advantage would seize upon this fracture, twisting it for their own purposes. And as much as Victoria tried to hold back the tide, she could already feel the future slipping from her grasp. A future where her daughter's choice would redefine everything they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and survival. Victoria had spent her entire life navigating the treacherous waters of family loyalty, betrayal, and power. But nothing cut her as deeply as the confession her daughter made to her one late evening when the walls of their house felt like they were closing in. Claire admitted the child growing inside her might not belong to Kyle at all but could just as easily be Holden's. The words shattered whatever fragile hope Victoria had been clinging to, because it was one thing for her daughter to have rushed into a relationship with an abbot, a family she had always mistrusted, but it was another for her to have entangled herself in a web of two men, risking everything for fleeting emotions that now threatened to ruin her entire future. Victoria's face hardened as the weight of disappointment settled in. She could not understand how her daughter, who had been raised with every warning and every lesson drawn from Victoria's own mistakes, had still allowed herself to fall into the oldest trap of all, confusing passion for stability, mistaking desire for love. To Victoria, Claire's recklessness felt like a mirror held up to her own youth, when she too had given her heart to freely and paid the price for it. The revelation tore open a chasm between them. For Claire, the confession was not an admission of weakness but an act of defiance. She told herself she could handle the fallout, that she would take whatever judgment came her way, because to her the baby was not a burden but a chance at something meaningful. Deep inside, she hoped the child was Kyle's. In her heart, she clung to the idea that if fate granted her this, then perhaps she and Kyle could find their way forward as a family, and the Abbotts would have to accept her place in their world. It was naive, but it was hope, and Claire needed hope to hold on to. Victoria, however, saw only chaos. If the DNA test revealed Holden was the father, Claire would be destroyed, publicly humiliated, and used as a pawn in the bitter games of Genoa City. If Kyle discovered the truth before Claire could control it, he would cast her aside with the coldness of a man who had been deceived. And the Abbotts would never forgive her for dragging their name into scandal. Victoria tried to warn her, her voice carrying the cold weight of experience, that once the truth emerged, Claire would be treated not with compassion but with cruelty. She would be branded careless, manipulative, a woman unfit for trust, and her life would spiral into a storm she could never escape. But Claire rejected her mother's warnings, shaking her head with the stubborn resilience of youth. She did not want to be haunted by what-ifs, by regrets about who she had been with or what others might say. She wanted to live for the present, to embrace the child growing inside her without allowing the shadows of the past to dictate her choices. It was reckless, yes, but to Claire it was also freeing. She wanted to prove that her life was her own, not an extension of Victoria's ambitions or the Newman legacy. For Victoria, this attitude was maddening. She had clawed her way through decades of pain to shield her family from weakness, and now her own daughter was choosing to walk willingly into the fire. The conflict between them became a war of divisions, one that saw survival through caution and ruthless honesty, and one that saw survival through stubborn defiance and hope. Victoria's mind churned with the impossible decision before her. Should she go to Kyle and reveal the truth, exposing her daughter's mistake in order to prevent greater damage later? The thought of going to Kyle filled her with dread, not because she feared his reaction but because she understood the consequences. If she told him the truth, she would be betraying her daughter's confidence, driving an irreparable wedge between them. And yet she would also be protecting her family's name and sparing Kyle from investing in a child that might not be his. It was cruel, but in Victoria's eyes, perhaps it was necessary. She had lived long enough to know that secrets had a way of destroying lives when they were left to rot in the dark. By confronting Kyle, she could seize control of the narrative before someone else did, before whispers and suspicions turned into a public scandal that neither the Newmans nor the Abbotts could contain. And yet, why should she take on that burden? Why should she be the one to deliver a blow that would crush her daughter's spirit and set Genoa City ablaze with gossip? She asked herself this over and over, pacing her office at Newman Enterprises, staring out at the city skyline as if the answers lay hidden in the glow of neon lights. Part of her believed she owed it to Kyle, that honesty was the only way to stop the cycle of lies that had destroyed so many relationships around them. Another part of her recoiled, knowing that if she spoke up, Claire would never forgive her. It was a trap with no good exit, a reminder that sometimes in life, every choice leads to ruin. The storm between mother and daughter grew darker with every passing day. Victoria's attempts to reason with Claire became sharper, laced with warnings that bordered on threats. Claire, in turn, grew more defiant, insisting that no one, not even her mother, could dictate what she did with her body, her child, or her future. Their voices clashed in the halls of the Newman estate, carrying echoes of all the generations of women who had fought for control over their own destinies, and each clash pushed them further apart. Victoria began to realize that her daughter was no longer a child she could command but a woman determined to walk her own path, even if that path led her straight into disaster. The weight of this realization nearly broke her, but it also steeled her resolve. In the quiet moments when she was alone, Victoria thought about her father Victor, and how he would have handled this situation. He would never have allowed weakness to fester. He would have confronted Kyle directly, seizing control of the truth and bending it to his will before anyone else could. The thought chilled her, but it also inspired her. Perhaps she needed to channel that same ruthless instinct if she wanted to save Claire, even if it meant sacrificing their trust in the process. She wondered whether Kyle deserved to know now, before the child was born, or whether it was wiser to wait until the DNA test confirmed the truth. Both options felt like playing with fire, but Victoria knew one thing for certain: the longer she stayed silent, the more dangerous the situation became. And so the question haunted her: would she go to Kyle and tell him everything, or would she protect her daughter's secret and gamble with their future? It was a choice between betrayal and silence, between saving her family's name and saving her daughter's faith in her. For once, the woman who always thrived on control found herself powerless, staring at a future that felt like it was spiraling out of her hands.